Welcome to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober.
Hello and welcome to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober. Colin is a personal injury attorney who has represented over 4,000 clients with a gross settlement recovery of over $50 million. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is The Art of the Deal, the key to winning against insurance companies. Colin, great seeing you again.
Happy to be here.
This is going to be one that I'm sure you're going to be excited to talk about. The
right.
keys to winning against insurance companies.
Love it. Let's go.
So we've touched on some of this before, but I'm excited to kind of pick your brain. When it comes to dealing with insurance companies in personal injury cases, what are some of the things that you would want your clients to keep in mind from the start?
The most important thing I can say, and I've said it a couple of times, but it's worth repeating, is that insurance companies will make you very frustrated because their job is to tell you no. But you have to keep in mind that an adjuster is only making you an offer based on the authority that they were given from somebody above them. And it's always, you've heard me say it about 74 times now, it's only a business decision, right? And so when you take the emotion out of it, even though it's a traumatic experience, to them it's a transaction. And your attorney's job is to bring that transaction and put some life to it, because you, as an attorney, you have to explain, this isn't a transaction. This is your opportunity to reach a settlement with this client to release your party at a lower expense, because if I have to present it to a jury, they'll probably pay me more than you want to pay right now.
And I feel like a lot of people probably look at insurance companies and think of this big giant and that they're going to have the upper hand in negotiations. And I mean, we've talked about it several times. You and I are big football guys. I mean, how many insurance commercials do we watch every season? You know what I mean? Oh my goodness. Yeah. They're constant. So you have this perception that, oh, wow, we're up against this juggernaut or whatever, but you don't see it that way.
No, I don't. And the reason I don't is because, like I said, the person giving me the bad offer is only giving it to me because they were given that authority from somebody else. My job is to move it from that person with the least amount of authority and get it to the person with the most authority to get a settlement that my client deserves.
When it comes to documentation, obviously evidence is everything. We want documentation as much as humanly possible. Can you talk about the type of evidence that you would want clients to gather to support their claim or protect their rights when they have to deal with insurance companies?
Well, I always recommend calling the police to make a formal report, because a lot of times the police officer is the one to corroborate both stories, get the statement, collect witness information, because sometimes we get police reports with witness information on it. With the phone number, we can just call them and say, hey, can we get your story? And of course, like I said, any footage, anybody that was there, your location, where you were. So if you weren't able to get that information yourself, at least we know where to go get it. You know, and then when it comes to, well, I'm injured, I've been in the hospital for 3 weeks, I've missed all this work, keep track of the dates that you missed. You know, basic information that you wouldn't think of. You're like, well, yeah, I mean, I'll get it. But nobody gets a pay stub in the mail anymore.
Right. Yeah.
You just log in and pull it down. Like, you know, and thank God you can do that. But a lot of times people are like, yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at my tax return since last April. Right. So people don't think of collecting that information in terms of lost wages, but it's nice to bring it to the forefront before an accident occurs. So, you know, hey, if I want lost wages, I need pay stubs, I need tax returns. If I miss work, I can keep track of it. If I'm having symptomology, headaches, inability to sleep, radiating pain, I can keep a journal to follow along as I go, so I don't have to remember everything that I endured as I'm going through this process. It's not anything that's super formalistic. It's just basic approaches to collecting and retaining the information so you can present it to somebody who can use it to your advantage.
How often do you see people trying to handle a case against an insurance company on their own?
Not very often.
Yeah.
Not very often, because usually what happens is the insurance company says something dumb to them and makes them really mad, and they're like, okay, I'm going to go get an attorney. And the funny thing is, I mean, it's a very simple transfer, because I think I mentioned this in one of our podcasts before, is there are individual adjusters who are assigned to the claim as soon as you file one. And then there are attorney-repped claim adjusters who get involved when we get involved. So as soon as we send in our letter of representation, letting them know that they're represented by an attorney, it goes from one person to the other. And now we're having a different conversation. And like I said, my job is to get it from the person who has the least authority to the most. And that's the first chess piece to move, right? Because now I'm talking to somebody who's like, all right, now I got an attorney lab. involved. I got to do something with this. And so that's one of the things that the insurance companies kind of bank on, is that, hey, if I can offer this person $2,000 right now to go away, then that's my opportunity. And some people are like, well, if they call me the next day, I'm not really in pain, and they offer me $2,000. Hey, I got my tax bill coming up. I'll take it. I don't blame you. But the problem with that is that if you do that and then your symptomology appears within the 3 or 4 day mark, and you took that money and you cashed that check, or you said, I'll take it, it's game over.
Yep.
And that's usually why people don't feel comfortable dealing with the insurance company, because they don't know that. Because if you are not represented by an attorney, like we said before, insurance company will call you and say, hey, can I get a statement? And if you give a statement and then they say, okay, well, based on what I heard, I'll offer you whatever dollars. Will you take it? All right, well, you don't have the check yet, but you said yes, and they have it in writing now because they have it transcribed. It's over, right? And so I wouldn't say that they're like predatory tactics, but they're not favorable.
Right. Yeah. They're not looking out for you.
Right. Their job is to get rid of you as quickly as possible.
So will they, if someone is not represented yet, or at least willing to answer their questions, will they kind of hammer it and try to really take advantage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they'll be like, you could say, well, the person was on their phone when they rear-ended me, the other driver. They're like, well, how do you know that? Or did you hit the brakes? Or were you speeding? How fast? Because I've had cases where the adjuster says, well, we're only accepting 70% liability because your client was speeding, when the truth of the matter is they were going 36 and a 35. Really? And so that's one of those things. If you say something like that, even though it's a mile over, they'll take that inch and run a mile with it. And so that's why we don't like them to talk to the insurance company if they need representation and they're truly injured. Because at the end of the day, if all you care about is your car, well, in that case, you shouldn't talk to them either. But I mean, I just highly recommend never giving a statement from the insurance company.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that's interesting. Like the tactics that they use to try to, when you're sitting there talking to them, you're like, well, I'm just being truthful and I'm being honest and I'm telling them everything that I should tell them. This is how the world works, but you don't realize that they're picking apart everything you're saying and looking for any sort of weak spot.
Right. And so it's kind of similar, because remember I told you about that client that we had with the hit and run with the blue Corvette. The guy said he was never there.
He was never there. Yeah.
Right. So the client gave her statement and said, yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy. And then the defendant said, no, I was never there. But because of what their driver said, because he pays them to represent him as the insurance company, they're paid to believe him. Right. So nothing you say to an insurance company that's not your own helps you, because they're paid to believe the other guy. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until she sent us the photos of the license plate and was like, hey, this is your guy, right? Yep. All right. So we settled it, but that they're not working in your favor is the point.
How often does an insurance company offer a fair offer right off the gate? When you were involved, when an attorney's involved, not before that.
Oh, I was going to say never.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it depends. It depends. And I know that's super attorney-like for me to say. Sure. It depends. But like if you have somebody who says, I was rear-ended and my back hurts and I went to a couple visits to a chiropractor, your offer will probably be reasonable to start. If you're one of those ones, like I said in a previous episode, where you get rear-ended but there's no damage on the bumper, even though there's no correlation, your offer is going to be terrible, simply because they're taking the position that if I can't see it, it didn't happen. If I can't see the damage, it didn't happen, right? Or the reverse is true. If you have a accident where you're rear-ended, there's some minor damage, but when the investigation was done and we found out that the defendant driver was arrested for his 4th DWI, you may have $4,000 in medical bills, but you can get a pretty lofty settlement because you were hit by somebody who has a habit of drinking while driving. So there are a bunch of different variables that all the attorneys weigh to make sure that all the angles are approached to maximize your settlement so that you feel comfortable settling at the end of the day.
So if you get that first offer and you're like, nope, that's not good, we're not going with that, how many opportunities do you typically give an insurance company to give you a good one? Is it just one more, or will you give them a chance to or do you just keep pushing them until you get to a point where you're like, yeah, this isn't going to go anywhere?
Well, it's more so of a question of how did they do when they evaluated the claim in the first place.
Okay.
If they presented an offer that was based on what we gave them, then I'm willing to negotiate, because at least I know they read it. If they only told me, oh, well, all these bills are inflated and I don't think all this stuff is necessary, because that's what they used to say. They don't do it anymore, but they used to say, well, the MRI that your client got was unremarkable and we're not paying because it was unremarkable. The only problem with that is that an MRI is diagnostic.
Right.
So you would never know whether the MRI was unremarkable unless you did the exam in the first place.
It's true.
Right? If they use those tactics and I know you're not negotiating with me in good faith, then I'm just going to sue you and we're going to move on.
Yeah.
So, but the reason there's kind of some ambiguity to that is because litigation commits you to a time frame the client may not like. And litigation also commits the client to additional case expenses that they don't want to pay.
Right.
So there has to be some reasonableness in it, where if you're negotiating with me on a good premise and we can at least disagree but come to a resolution, then we should. But if you're coming out of the gate with unreasonable offer and you think that my client's going to accept it, we're skipping you and going to the next one.
Interesting. So you just kind of evaluate the offer based on what the reasoning for the offer, and you can kind of get a sense of whether or not it's worth continuing to try to settle.
Right. Because I think I mentioned before that the best tactic, in my opinion, and their attorneys do it completely differently wherever you are, but when I get my first offer, I'm not the next one to throw out the counter demand. I want you tell me how you came up with your numbers so I know where I'm negotiating from. Mm-hmm. If you miss a bunch of objective findings in my demand that I know exist because I wrote the demand, then I'm not negotiating with you. If you acknowledge it, but you just have a different opinion, then we can talk. I mean, it's supposed to be a negotiation. That's why, you know what, I think you mentioned before, some people feel like insurance companies are this big bad dude. And I don't look at it that way, because I don't have to negotiate with them if I don't like it.
That's true. That's
right?
true. Yeah.
There's nothing scary about them, because you can just move on to the next phase. Like I said, the only caveat to that is that you have to keep the client in mind. You can't be one of those attorneys with one of these big egos and say, we're going to file suit right now, run up the expenses on the client, when you could have just picked up the phone and got it done, because the client may have been willing to accept it. You have to weigh that. But as long as if you weigh it and explain it to your client, then they're more willing to go along.
Do you find that you get used to how certain insurance companies operate? Like, do they all, so they're not all kind of the same? They all have their nuances?
Oh yeah. Like there's one in particular, I'm surprised they're still in business. I mean, I'm just like, you can never get them on the phone. So the only way to get them to do anything is to sue them.
Okay.
Is to sue their driver. I'm like, dude, you got to get some new insurance, dog, because they just threw you under the bus. I mean, and that's how it goes. They're terrible. And I wish them well. No, I don't. But they're all different, but they use the same tactics. Our tactics change based on the way that they interact with us. So that one in particular, we can't negotiate with them because they never answer the phone. Okay, well, then the only way I can put you on the clock is to file a lawsuit and give you the deadlines you have to meet. So yes, the tactics are different, but they're relatively the same.
How do you get insured? Do any of none of the companies must like you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. Although my parents are like, well, you're the reason my insurance rates are so high. So yeah, probably, but at least it's for a good cause.
I love it.
Yeah. Like, what do you want from me?
Yeah, that's the tough part, right? It's they're a necessary evil, if you will, but definitely, you know, when it really comes down to it, they don't always have the back of the common man, do they?
Well, and that's the thing is like, yes, you know, a lot of people have a lot of baggage towards personal injury attorneys, especially car accident attorneys, because you've got those other attorneys out there just making us look like idiots for their trashy commercials that make you just want to cringe, right?
Yep, and those weirdo billboards or the weirdo whatever.
And so that's one of the reasons I really like doing this podcast with you in particular, because I can explain to you why at least my firm does what it does and the rationale and the responses that we're getting that cause us to do what we do, right? There is a rationale, and I can tell you why or what the insurance companies are doing, which is why I did what I did. Mm-hmm. Nobody tells that whole story. So we all look like a bunch of ambulance chasers just trying to raise people's interest rates. And there are some, I'm not one of them, but there are some. And so the opportunity to explain that, you know, makes me feel like I've justified my time as an attorney in all the cases that I've done, because it truly is for a genuine purpose.
Yeah. You know, I've even talked to attorneys, personal injury attorneys who used to work for insurance companies or used to work at least in some sort of defense and felt dirty about it. Didn't like the way they felt. And they said, no, I got to go to the other side. This is ridiculous.
Right. And so if insurance companies worked in good faith, and some of them do,
Sure.
They're not, I mean, I don't like any of them, but they're not technically, they're all not garbage. I don't like it. But if they did what they were supposed to and they took care of the people that they were supposed to take care of, then we wouldn't be involved in the first place. But it's the people that it's those cases where we're arguing with the insurance adjuster trying to say, well, yeah, I know I hit your guy, but I don't think your guy is injured. I don't care what you think. And because you're trying to assert your personal opinion without any medical background whatsoever, I got to sue you. And that's why it is what it is.
Yeah, it's kind of a messed up situation if you really think about it, that you have this insurance adjuster like fighting you on what doctors say, and you're like, what are you qualified to be making this determination?
Yes, I know.
Not a lot of other industries would that be allowed.
Their first response is, well, where did you get your medical degree? And I'm like, I didn't get one. I deferred to the expert.
Yeah, I have a doctor's
report. You can throw that at me, but you didn't get one either.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Well, I've said this before. I'm glad there's people like you who do what you do to help represent the rest of us.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober. To connect with Colin and his team, visit boberlawfirm.com, and please like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. Colin, as always, great to chat with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.